Good evening. My name is Esther Theiler and I'm the chair of the Trobe University Art History Alumni Chapter. On behalf of the committee, I would like to welcome you to the 24th Annual Rae Alexander Lecture. I would also like to respectfully acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, who are the traditional owners of the land where I speak, and pay my respect to their elders past, present and emerging. This series of lectures was founded in 1998 and named in honour of Rae Alexander, who was the first president of the Art History Alumni Chapter. And this year we're pleased to have about 150 attendees registered, demonstrating the real interest in the community in visual art. I would like to thank those of you who took the opportunity of donating to our Art History Chapter Fund. This year, the proceeds will go towards commissioning writing or writings by Indigenous art historians and curators that develops original thinking on artworks by Indigenous artists in the Trobe University art collection. I would also like to thank our Alumni Advancement Officer, Carly Micallef, for her administrative and technical assistance in organising this event. We are very honoured tonight to be graced by the presence of our guest speaker, Judith Ryan, who will be speaking about artworks that originate among the Yolŋu people of Eastern Arnhem land. It seems fitting that over the last few days, we've been receiving the warm, moisture-laden tropical air generated by a La Nina system in the northern parts of Australia that's been carried through a system of low pressure troughs to reach our state, resulting in this humid weather and soaking rain. This seems to be an appropriate metaphor for the nourishment and the messages we can receive from these East Arnhem land art and artists, and from Judith Ryan's generous sharing of her years of research and interaction with these artists. I'll now call upon the presenter of last year's Rae Alexander Lecture, Vincent Alessi, who's still but only just senior lecturer in art history at La Trobe University. He's a former director of the Art Museum at La Trobe and co-director of Connor's Gallery, to introduce our speaker. Thank you, Vince.
Thank you, Esther, and welcome everybody this evening. I had the great privilege last year of presenting the Rae Alexander Lecture, and this year have the great privilege in introducing our speaker, Judith Ryan. I'd likewise like to begin by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations of the lands where I'm actually located this evening, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Judith Ryan AM was born in Melbourne, Australia, and received a Bachelor of Arts with honours in Fine Arts and English Literature at the University of Melbourne in 1970, and a Certificate in Education at Oxford University in 1972. In 1977, she began her art museum career at the National Gallery of Victoria, where she was Senior Curator of Indigenous Art on her retirement in 2021. I dare to say one of the longest careers at the National Gallery in its history. She greatly contributed to planning, initiating and advancing the NGV's Indigenous art collection from 1987 onwards. She has curated over 50 exhibitions, focused on increasing the visibility, accessibility, and revealing the magnificence of Indigenous art. She has brokered this unique expression of culture through a period of immense social political change, and is currently working as a curatorial advisor to the exhibition 65,000 Years, A Short History of Australian Art at the University of Melbourne. In 2016, Judith curated Who's Afraid of Colour, a major survey of contemporary Indigenous women's art comprising over 200 works by 118 artists. Judith Ryan, as well as having an exceptional curatorial career, is also the author of many books in the field, including Images of Power, Aboriginal Art of the Kimberley, Colour Power, Aboriginal Art post-1984, and Jukurajuna, Origins of Western Desert Art. Her most recent publication, Tiwi, Art and Artists from 2020, won gold in the Australian, New Zealand, Pacific Rim Best Regional Non-Fiction category at the 2021 Independent Publisher Book Awards. In 2017, Judith Ryan was awarded a member of the Order of Australia in the General Division for significant service to the visual arts, particularly to the museums and gallery sector, as a curator of Indigenous exhibitions and as an author. Judith has a wonderful list of achievements and is rightly considered as one of the great curators in this country. What she also is a brilliant communicator. I've had the great privilege of working with Judith over many summers when she contributed to the Trobe University's summer school subject at the NGV. Every year at the end of that subject, when students were interviewed and asked about their experience, at the top of their list of most enjoyable moments was Judith's lectures and gallery tours. We're excited to have Judith present this year's annual Rae Alexander Lecture, and I'm sure, like many of our students, we will undoubtedly rank tonight's lecture as one of the highlights of the many that the Art History alumni have presented. Judith's lecture this evening is titled Tracking Yolŋu Art, 1930s to Now. If time permits, we will have questions at the end of Judith's presentation. You can type questions into the Q&A function on your webinar screen, and I will moderate those at the end of the conclusion of the lecture. And it's now my great honour to welcome Judith Ryan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vince, for your wonderful words of acknowledgement. I feel quite humbled because I've known Vince for quite some time, and also I had a lovely time at the Trobe University with Inga Clendining studying Mesoamerican ethnohistory. She's one of my great champions. I honour her memory. Tonight, I acknowledge the traditional owners of the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Greater Kulin Nation, where I'm gathered tonight, and I've lived almost all of my existence, like my mother who grew up here. And I pay my respect to their elders past, present and emerging. And I also welcome any First Peoples who may be joining this lecture on Zoom. I also honour the many Yolŋu artists whose work I will discuss tonight and who share their art and their culture with us. It is all through the agency of Bukalange Molka Yirakala. My mentor, James Mollison, told me that the best art is what is being produced now. And when considering Aboriginal art, that the artists are the land they paint. His words are still with me. In 2014, I visited the newly opened subterranean Egyptian Museum in Munich and was struck by the prominent entrance display of Maurizio Nanucci's neon work, All Art Has Been Contemporary, demanding that the exhibits be viewed in a new way, rather than being dichotomized as ancient or modern, traditional or contemporary. There was a time when bark paintings were considered folk art and were not allowed in the Cologne Art Fair. John Mowengel's work was rejected. This was a time when, which we have now, thankfully, transitioned from. And we shouldn't be having these juxtapositions or dichotomies, contemporary or traditional. All work was once contemporary, and if we look at it that way, I think it gains vitality and presence. Moreover, when considering work by Australia's First Peoples, we should be forever mindful of the devastating consequences of the British invasion of 1788, as graphically expressed by Gumatj leader Galarrwuy Yunupingu. Backed by the guns of soldiers and settlers and with the support of a group of exiled criminals, these strangers began a process of rape and destruction of a land and its people. The history of that invasion is one in which many of our people have died or have been hunted from their lands. It is a history where the invaders carried out a deliberate program of trying to destroy our cultures. Faced with a combination of guns and Bibles, many of our people were forced to abandon their ceremonies and songs. The ochre arabesques produced by Yolŋu artists of northeast Arnhem Land are the byproducts of colonial encounter and the traditional owners' resolve to dance with the strangers who had come to appropriate their lands as a political act that evidences their essentialism. Significantly, as Yunupingu asserts, This widespread theft of land has had a huge impact on the art of Yolŋu and other First Peoples living in colonised Australia. When we paint, whether it is on our bodies for ceremony or on bark or canvas for the market, we are not just painting for fun or profit. We are painting as we have always done to demonstrate our continuing link with our country and the rights and responsibilities we have to it. Furthermore, we paint to show the rest of the world that we own this country and that the land owns us. Our painting is a political act. We're looking at works by Marwalin Marika and Birikichi Gumana, both clan leaders of Dua and Yirracha moiety. Fabulous works from 1959, 1962. The classic examples of bark paintings by Yolŋu people. In thinking about art, the Mexican poet and art historian Octavio Paz stated, "In the beginning was the eye, and then there was the word." I think when we're looking at art, it's the visual power of it that captivates us. And that is what we will be focusing on in this form of visual culture. But just remember that painting is also synonymous with dancing and singing. So to art is to paint, is to paint is to sing, is to dance. And we've got a wonderful visual music happening here. The Italian Renaissance artist Raphael said, "Seeing is a doubled active relationship to things," while the actor Tom E. Lewis, playing an Indigenous King Lear, proclaimed, "Our temples are built in the ground. Our castles are in the dirt. We ourselves are written in the stars." Like many Melburnians who grew up in the 1950s and 60s when these bark paintings were made, the shameful days of the White Australia policy, which in many respects endure to this day, I have virtually no contact with Australia's First Peoples during my school days. My first introduction to their culture came through looking at images of Aboriginal people in a Viewmaster and through fleeting contact with a Methodist missionary who had been superintendent of Milingimbi Mission for over a decade and had a small collection of cultural objects. As a 9 or 10-year-old, I was fascinated by the still images in the Viewmaster and painted a work depicting 3 bearded Aboriginal men wearing loincloths and ochre body designs standing on their country against a blue, clear sky. One of the men was pointing the bone. I still don't know how I heard about this sorcery practice and have learnt little more about it since. But then as now, it said something about power, danger and unknowability and the romantic stereotype of history. Unbeknown to me then, in 1967, Jim Davidson opened his Aboriginal Pacific Gallery in Ivanhoe East, not far from where I lived then and now. My introduction to Aboriginal art came in late 1977 after I commenced as circulations officer at the NGV and began regularly visiting Jim Davidson's gallery. Here I saw photographs of great Yolŋu artists and was able to immerse myself in works of intimate scale by Marwalin, Matherman, Mungaroy, Narrabeen, Birikichi, and a host of other Yolŋu leaders. These works displaying Minji, ancestral designs of profound and unknowable meaning and possessing a matte reality of form and an intuitive modern aesthetic compelled me beyond measure. In 1979, my knowledge sharpened when I curated a travelling exhibition, Aboriginal Oceanic Decorative Art, featuring bark paintings of Mangalili artist Narrabeen Maimuru and oceanic cultural objects. Now, my introduction to Indigenous art was through Yolŋu art, and that is why this lecture is very personal to me, and it spans my life's journey in Indigenous art. And more importantly, in 1979, I began work on the huge exhibition Aboriginal Australia, shown in 3 venues in 1981 to 82. This comprehensive project enabled me to develop a close familiarity with Australian museum collections, the writings of then developing anthropologists, including Howard Morphy, Carol Cooper, Nick Peterson, and John Mulvaney, the old father statesman, and with different forms of material culture and art, illustrated by a selection of superb cultural objects, sculptures, bark paintings, and early Papunya paintings drawn from public collections throughout Australia. The 329 exhibits, purporting to cover all aspects of Aboriginal Australia and its prehistory, did not include one work by a named female artist. Since my work on Aboriginal Australia, I have been on a perpetual quest to know more and have been enabled through my work at the NGV to witness great moments of innovation in Yolŋu as Yolŋu art, through the agency of Bukalange, has moved out of ethnographic museums and transitioned into art museums, biennales and art fairs of the 20th and 21st centuries. Today, Yolŋu contemporary artists, both female and male, work across media in ways that break new ground, defying preconceptions of what Yolŋu art should look like and mean. Instead of a small work on stringy bark, the scale of a man's chest, we may experience the visual power and energy of Nyapa Nyapa Yunupingu's 110 free drawings on acetate. When there was no bark during the dry season, the bark dries up, there's no bark available, and Nyapa Nyapa was so inspired to make marks that she made them on acetate and then created a beautiful light drawing, which is shown on a screen, in which all of these 110 drawings are linked. And each time you look at the screen, it's a different manifestation. It's a brilliant work, the light painting. Works on discarded rubber and insulation material, a forest of larrakitch, hollow poles of immense diversity, incised and feathered barks, metal sculptures or video installations that still adhere to Yolŋu cultural law, yet break boundaries and defy the stereotypes of ethnographic essentialism. As an art historian, I will take you on a personal experiential journey through which trajectories and great innovative moments in Yolŋu art history can be glimpsed in images of works encountered in my curatorial work at NGV and in major exhibitions and art awards across time. But the digital images can't capture the materiality of form, scale, or dynamic frisson of any of these performative works or their awe-inspiring presence. By far the earliest well-documented Yolŋu bark paintings of scale and aesthetic sophistication are those collected from Milingimbi and Caledon Bay. You can see Milingimbi here on your map, and Caledon Bay, where the Eastern Arnhem Land Yolŋu live now, 26 different homeland communities. They were collected by anthropologist Donald Thompson from 1935 to 1942. This masterful suite of paintings and cultural objects, gifted to the university in 1973 and stored at Museums Victoria ever since, has rarely seen the light of day. I remember encountering those barks en masse for the first time in 2009 in Ancestral Power and the Aesthetic at the Ian Potter Museum of Art. These paintings reveal the complexities associated with the artist's distinctive minji and the tenets that underpin a uniquely Yolŋu aesthetic practice. The fine aesthetic qualities sought and achieved in Yolŋu painting are brilliance or birion, identified by Thompson in his field notes, was intended to capture the essence of the Wonga, ancestral being, and harness its ma or power. In his 1937 field notes, Thompson explored in detail the concept of this Yolŋu aesthetic and the way in which the power of the ancestor is evoked by a sensory experience, a flash, a sudden uplift, a sensation of light when exposed to minji. Moreover, these works clearly lay claim to Yolŋu ownership of major clan estates of Blue Mud Bay in Eastern Arnhem Land. Today, I am again working with these sublime cultural objects of unfathomable meaning and transcendent beauty and power. They remain a gold standard of Yolŋu art, but no form of Aboriginal art is fixed in time. Rather, it is a living force that occupies a continuum, like a song cycle that has no beginning or end. While we're looking at these slides, I just want you to focus on the difference of these particular clan designs, which stand stark and are highlighted by that fabulous use of the red ochre background. Now, my first introduction to bark painting, I was informed that really Kuningu art of Western Arnhem Land had a plain red ochre background or a different coloured background, and Yolŋu art was painted with designs right to the edge. So I wasn't expecting a red ochre background until I saw reproductions of these Donald Thompson barks. Some of the most audacious barks collected by Thompson depict anthropomorphic forms that reference the intricate clan-owned Marian Minji painted on the chest and thighs of men, and illustrate the immediacy and inventiveness of transferring intricate crosshatched body markings to the red ochre surface of stringy bark with a Marawat human hair brush, where they stand stark in negative space and project a powerful presence. By rendering visible designs seen on the body in men's Nara ceremonies, Yolŋu artists invented a language, creating anthropomorphic compositions on a flat plane with linear designs that distinguish the various Dua and Yirracha moiety clans, balanced and floating against plain ochre backgrounds. And that's not often a feature of Yolŋu bark paintings until the second decade of the new millennium. For straight after these exchanges with Thompson in central and eastern Arnhem Land, when Yolŋu elders gave these designs to Thompson, this is an act of gift and of revelation that happened because they trusted Thompson. The Yolŋu of Eastern Arnhem Land have developed a different style of painting on bark. The designs usually covered the whole surface from edge to edge and often included figurative elements that concealed some of the Minji sacred designs. There's another one. So you can see these different clan designs, very distinct. And notice the use of asymmetry. They're not symmetrical. There's a beautiful crookedness in the bark, and they float in the negative space. Two special Japu designs signal the path ahead for Yolŋu art, in which figurations of the Jungawal sisters story and Jungawal the Thunder Man are embedded in a complex interplay of disparate sections of crosshatching that signify their power and presence, one of which stretches to the edge of the bark, while the other is bordered with red ochre. It should be noted that these extraordinary organic objects emerged from Eastern Arnhem Land at a time when all that was publicly known of that region was the arrest of Yolŋu men charged with killing Japanese fishermen who had molested their women at Caledon Bay, which was the catalyst for Donald Thompson's investigative journey to Arnhem Land in 1935 and the establishment of the Yirrkala Methodist Mission in the same year. In 1947, Yolŋu leaders at Yirrkala experimented with lumber crayons on brown paper, an initiative of anthropologist Ronald M. Berndt. Although familiar with some images in reproduction, in 2013 I was awestruck to encounter these works in Yirrkala drawings at the Art Gallery of New South Wales, an exhibition in which contemporary larrakitsch and historical drawings faced each other. The elders' drawings in the most basic of materials, lumber crayons on brown paper, give the Minji a brilliant geometry of colour and bold line, quite different from the quartet of natural ochres. You don't get those tonal nuances or the fine Marawat striations, so that instead of the quiescent tones of 4 vibrating strings, the viewer could sense other colours of the orchestra and clearly distinguish between the designs of different clans. These are Yirritja moiety diamond designs that signify water of the left and fire on the right. But the diamond also relates to salt water or fresh water or brackish water, but often fire. And these are the Dua moiety designs, often straight lines, different totally from the Yirritja. In my earliest months at the NGV, before Patrick McCarthy decided to collect contemporary Aboriginal art in 1984-85, I discovered in wooden drawers the earliest Yolŋu barks by named artists in the collection. 5 paintings were accurately identified, unlike those collected by Charles P. Mountford, donated by the Commonwealth Government in 1956. These barks eventuated in 1952 because Darryl Lindsay, then NGV director, at variance with accepted museum precedent, wrote to the Minister for the Interior to request a selection of 25 Aboriginal bark paintings for loan to the gallery for the purpose of display. Importantly, Lindsay stated, although in the past the majority of these have been collected by natural history museums for ethnological purposes, it has long been my view that their artistic merit is such that a number of them should be shown in the art galleries throughout Australia. In August 1952, in response to Lindsay's letter, 8 bark paintings were presented to the gallery, 5 from Yirrkala and 3 from Owen Pelly. Moreover, at Lindsay's explicit request, the Yolŋu paintings from Yirrkala were accompanied by detailed documentation in the form of diagrams, an extreme rarity for this period. In 1961, the NGV made its first purchases of Yolŋu bark paintings from Jim Davidson's gallery, but discontinued this initiative because the NGV was then sharing the Russell Street building with the National Museum of Victoria, and such work was still deemed the province of an ethnographic museum. Eric Westbrook told me that he was told to stop in 1961, or we could have had a very impressive collection of these earlier barks. During the early 60s, Yolŋu of Yirrkala, facing dispossession of their land owing to bauxite mining of the Gove Peninsula, sensed the need to use the language of art to assert their authority and to show that Christian and Yolŋu belief were not incompatible, resulting in the church panels of 1962-3. The 2 panels, Platonic forms of Dua and Yirritja Minji, that together constitute ancestrally sanctioned charters to their lands, established before time, show that Yolŋu art, politics and cultural law are inseparable and inviolable. These sublime aesthetic wonders of the world, the hands and spiritual vision of 16 Yolŋu leaders, are proudly displayed at Bukalange, having originally been installed behind the altar in the Yirrkala church, then removed by a later Methodist minister and stored without protection under the eaves of the church. Only days after the Yirrkala church panels were unveiled, over 300 square kilometres of Yolŋu country was excised from the Arnhem Land Reserve for bauxite mining, without one Yolŋu voice being heard. In 1963, Yolŋu sent a bilingual petition to the federal government demanding that their rights in land be protected and recognised, not as a telegram, but attached to 2 sheets of stringy bark, Dua and Yirritja. You can see the Yirritja diamond designs on the one on the right. In 1959, the signatories of the bark petitions and leading contributors to the church panels were commissioned by Tony Tuxson and Dr. Stuart Scougal to produce a selection of monumental bark paintings for the Art Gallery of New South Wales, where I often travelled and ventured downstairs in the basement to gaze at these exquisite paintings that mapped Yolŋu title deeds to land and were sublime works of art. In 1989, James Mollison, a huge believer, here are two of the works that were collected by Scougal and Tony Tuxon, supreme masterpieces. In 1989, James Mollison, a huge believer in Yolŋu art, commenced his directorship at the NGV. He was appalled at the paucity of our bark collection. I think at the time he asked me how many barks there were, and I said there were 14 in the collection only. And he directed me to assemble apace a representative collection and to curate an exhibition. In 1990, Spirit in Land bark paintings from Arnhem Land eventuated, but the NGV needed to borrow a group of major Yolŋu barks from the National Museum of Australia. Mangalileatus Yukaki and Naminapu Maimuru flew down for the opening, at which Yukaki gave an impassioned speech. The weakness in the collection deeply concerned Mollison, who was cognizant of the NGA's major collection of big barks from Ramangini and the 1989 John Kluge Commission. Consequently, the NGV contacted Andrew Blake at Bukalange to arrange a big bark commission involving the clan leaders of both moieties. Vitally important in this commission were Japu leader Jurajura Muninga from the Dua moiety and Dawangu leader Garawin Gumana from the Yiracha moiety, whose first big barks were exhibited in the huge 1990 contemporary show, Power of the Land, titled after Wandjuk Marika's words. And in this exhibition, which was in the Old Murdoch Court and the Robert Rayner Gallery, we had women's art in the Rayner Gallery, I had no labels. We just had numbers on the wall because my thought was that people should look at the works of art. It's, it's an important thing when you go into an exhibition to gaze and stare fixedly at what you're looking at. And Power of the Land was titled after Wandjuk Marika's words. Painting is very important. It's the design or symbol, power of the land. I'm not painting just for my pleasure. There is the meaning, knowledge and power. The land is not empty. The land is full of knowledge, full of story, full of goodness, full of energy, full of power. In 1990, the collection of big barks, and some of these are 3 metres tall, was exhibited in Minji Bukalange in a new exhibition space, appropriately opened by Garawin Gumana, who declared the space in which the works were exhibited Nara, sacred ground. An ochre painting on stringy bark, irregular, 3-dimensional, curving back to its tree shape, splitting, bending, concave, convex, knotty, has a singular aesthetic which is a product of the medium. The physical properties derived from the land of which the artists are part have a metaphorical dimension as suggested by Garawin's words. I am the people of water, earth and mud. Reticent ochre shades meet subdued tones, organic colours of earth, of country, of which the artist is part. Its sound is quiet, from rock, mud, earth, and serious of heart. It tells us something for the old people in the past and for people to understand today. The Big Bark Commission, and we see 4 of the barks here, ushered in a period of immense creativity and a return to the monumental barks of the late 1950s and early 60s with its display of disparate minji proclaiming the certainty of place and the power of Yolŋu customary law. The split stick binders, a remnant of a hanging system devised during the 1950s by Doug Tuffin in consultation with Yolŋu, and the borders characteristic of paintings from 1940s onwards were still present. Significantly, in 1997, Yolŋu initiated a saltwater collection for sea rights, designed to demonstrate their rights and responsibilities over specific areas of both coast and sea, and to protect those same marine environments from abuse by outsiders, rights already recognised by Macassan seafarers to their shores from around 1600 until 1907, as Munyuko Elder Dula explained. Sacred art has been etched by the sea, where the ocean named Wollumba roars. The water existed in ancestral times and the cycle continues. It is massive, ancient, endless infinity. We are caretakers for the ocean. That is what the law says. Wherever the cloud stands, it is saying that. These clouds symbolise the ancestral beings and their descendants, the Yolŋu. In 2008, the High Court of Australia confirmed that traditional owners of the Northern Territory coastline have exclusive access rights to the tidal waters overlying their land. The Aboriginal Memorial of 1988, an installation of 200 memorial hollow poles from central Arnhem land, which commemorates all the Indigenous people who since 1788 have lost their lives defending their country, revealed the hitherto unexplored aesthetic possibilities of Loricon and Larrakitch memorial hollow poles as contemporary art objects, particularly during the dry season when sheets of stringy bark are scarce. In about 2000, Yolŋu of Yirrkala also embarked on the production of large numbers of Larrakitch. In 2006, Brooke, Garrow, Andrew and I judged the Nazia and awarded first prize to Garrowin's Birrakuda Larrakitch. The upper part of this soaring political symbol of mourning depicts a minji belonging to the freshwater Dalwongu or Manacha clan, which was decimated by a police pastoral massacre at Gungun around 1910, leaving only one surviving member. I remember Garrowin's inspiring words at the opening. I did not make the Larrakitch for my community to see, but so that black and white could walk together. Synchronous with this developing interest in producing large numbers of aesthetically sophisticated Larrakitch, Marapal clan leader Jambawa Marawili developed a style in which representational elements are obscured. His paintings are stripped of concrete motifs and plain outer borders and are flooded with light through the dominance of white ochre, which overlays the figurative imagery so that it sinks back into the waters signified by the minji, thereby creating a sense of burawak, invisibility or hidden figures. In Baru, 2007 on the left, without breaching Yolŋu protocol, Marawili has used strings and swathes of diamond patterns to camouflage and distract from the figurative imagery, which appears to slip below the waterline. To the initiated eye, the geometric designs infilled with crosshatching tell an important Marapa creation story where Baru, the crocodile, dived into the waters off Yathikpa, carrying the fire that burnt into its back. Jambawa's deliberate intention is to convey power and sacred knowledge in a painting by embedding, hiding its presence in the patterned, shimmering, and at times veiled surface. Jambawa's work reflects a broader Yolŋu tendency to submerge or eclipse the figures, animals, and objects that from the 1960s onwards had been used to shield sacred designs from balanda, outsiders. Heightening this shift towards invisibility, Yolŋu artists removed both the split stick binders and the plain border of pigment that used to lie under the wood and framed the design, and painted right to the edges, empowering the minji to stretch beyond the sheet of bark and express the infinity of the land and its undiluted power. It's great to see these barks just without frames, without glass, just floating on a wall, so that we can understand and appreciate them as objects, concave, convex, with a beautiful roughness and rawness. Similarly, Maripula artist Wukan Wanumbi has developed a minimalist painting style in which myriad tiny fish swarm and virtually disappear across a white ground that covers stringy bark or larrakitch. Wukan was one of the first, if not the first, Yolŋu artist to prioritise natural irregularities in his larrakitch sculptures, and he keeps track of where such hollowed out eucalypts are to be found so that he can make his own larrakitch with their fabulous eccentricities. They're like eccentric rocks. Traditionally, the poles were straight and perfect cylinders. Wukan's eye for nature's organic eccentricities has transformed the way larrakitch are viewed as art and as a continuation of a long-standing cultural practice. From the 1960s to the 1980s, when Aboriginal art was becoming an integral part of the economy of communities in Arnhem Land and Central Australia, women were generally denied access to art materials, a situation that was not questioned or challenged. If women were encouraged, it was largely to produce woven items of a utilitarian nature or to assist their husbands or fathers with the decorative infilling of paintings on bark or canvas. Significantly, during the 1960s, Yolŋu clan leaders, Marwolin and Narrabeen, taught their daughters to paint. But until the new millennium, most Yolŋu women focused on weaving and printmaking rather than painting on bark, with notable exceptions such as Galama, Maimuru, Naminapu, Maimuru, and of course, the Warrawa Marika. In 2004, an artist of the infinite emerged quietly at the 23rd National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Art Award. Gumatj woman artist Gulumbu Yunupingu was awarded first prize. For Garak the Universe, 3 larrakitch, which rather than displaying clan designs, were painted with countless tiny stars in tonal nuances of natural ochres, representing the architecture of the sky, its wholeness. Gulumbu's art practice had a long gestation period, stimulated by witnessing her father, Mungaroy, paint and listening deeply to his ancestral narratives chronicling the genesis of the Yolŋu universe. 3 decades after her father's death, while working in the print medium and remembering his stories of 2 groups of sisters who transformed into stars, Gulumbu conceived her signature multi-starred iconography that signifies Garak the universe. Gulumbu's cosmic paintings and larrakitch of infinitesimal stars are also universal in their inclusiveness, issuing from the premise that people of all colours look up and see the stars, attesting to the healing power of Yolŋu art. The multiple individual stars mirror the known constellations of the night sky, whereas the spaces in between, marked with dots, suggest what is beyond human comprehension. The secular star-shaped motif derives from Gulumbu's visual memory of one of her treasured father's works. Thus, art has come from art and become an act of homage. Gulumbu's visionary larrakitch and her winning of the Telstra Award eventually inspired her younger sisters, Nyapa Nyapa and Barapu, to develop their own painting practice and idiosyncratic individual styles. These 3 Gumatj sisters have initiated a revolution in that their work is enticingly asymmetrical and intuitive, reconfiguring or bypassing preordained minji and ordered sequences of meticulous cross-hatching. Bark painting, formerly the preserve of men, has thus broken free of an ethnographic taxonomy, a compulsive maker of marks on any available surface. Nyapa Nyapa initially produced wacky and boldly coloured screen prints before she began to paint tiny barks in 2007, creating amorphous forms of indeterminate creatures that revealed her vitality of hand and independent spirit. The following year, she won the Nazia 3D Award with an installation that reimagined her frightening 1970s experience of being badly gored by a buffalo while collecting wild apples at Mutpi. fractured shifts of 4 colours of cross-hatching can be seen in the backgrounds of her early barks, and these provide a starting point for Nyapa Nyapa's 2010 paintings, which have become progressively less figurative. Her groundbreaking exercises in random line and percussive rhythm that have been jokingly referred to as meaningless by other Yolŋu reveal her absolute absorption in the process of painting. Will Stubbs, art coordinator of Buku, described such forms of improvised visual music as spontaneous zen, for each brushstroke has no memory of the previous one and no anticipation of the one to come. One of the clearest instances of the artist's incessant and layered mark making is her pink diptych, with its multiple nuances of pink, white, and red, and its textual variations. This diptych was an impromptu happening because the right-hand side, created first, fitted beautifully with the left-hand edge, a work painted by the artist free of agency when she was focusing on working in tonalities of pink. In this diptych, Nyapa Nyapa expressed her capacity to live in the moment. There is no calculation or even regard for the audience in her paintings, which are an expression of the spontaneous movements of her hand as they happen to have taken place on that particular day. These 3 sisters of whom I speak are no longer with us. These slides are memorial to their greatness. The 3rd sister, Barapu, worked for a decade in the print medium before she determined to paint on bark in 2007. Her paintings of ancestral fire represent her father's major subject, but she focused entirely on painting the essence of fire, unmitigated by figurative elements that form part of the narrative. The interconnected diamonds and crosshatched elements are foregrounded and painted with a singular gestural freedom and vigour, utterly unlike her father's exquisite compositions of cascading horizontal and vertical diamonds. Barapu constantly varied the rhythm and timbre of her animated drawings of rough-hewn diamonds. Look at the vigour of these 2 paintings. I'm going to leave out a little bit so that I can have time to finish my lecture, but I'm not leaving out Nonganya. In the midst of this resurgence of Yolŋu art led by its senior women, Marapa artist Nonganya Marawili has created a formidable body of work that possesses an astounding visual power and vitality of line. Nonganya, who draws organically as a plant grows, enjoys figuration, negative space, and dramatic tonal contrasts. Her earliest barks from 2011 accentuate the Japu Menji, the vigorous black linear thrusts and squares of her husband and mentor Judith, who taught her to paint and whom she assisted until his death in 1999. Nonganya's Thunderman Raining Down represents Bolnu, controller of the seasons, an important subject she witnessed Jura painting in 1994. From 2013, the artist began to paint in a quicker and looser manner. She introduced Marapa iconography and transitioned into works composed of loose drawings on large segments of plain colour, such as her dramatic embodiment of Mundapu, the powerful lightning snake who lives deep beneath the sea at Baratula, the Marapa clan estate adjacent to Cape Shield. These are cyclonic, crocodile-infested waters with huge tides and ripping currents, which Nonganya visited by canoe with her father Mundapu as a young girl. This design shows the deep water and the curse that the snake spits into sky in the form of lightning, which hits the sea spray being thrown up as rough waves crash into the subterranean rock. This is a painting of fire, but also of water. It is a raw rendition of the Marapa sacred design for the ocean at Yathikpa, which is melting and crashing on the horizon. Lightning on the Rock represents a further aesthetic shift in Nonganya's rapidly developing earth and a point of departure from many other recent forms of Yolŋu bark painting. The artist has stripped away much of the cross-hatching and pared back the imagery to depart from one of the established canons of Yolŋu art, namely that the background be covered with designs rather than left plain. In this bark, Nonganis shows the sacred rock set in deep water between the electric curse that the snake spits into sky in the form of lightning and the spray of the sea that threatens to dislodge the immovable rock foundation of the Marapa people. Intriguingly, the negative space and bold simplicity of Nonganis' work approaches in form and visual power Mundakul's work for Donald Thompson on the same subject. In 1942, Mundakul transferred Minji, seen on a man's chest, to the red ochre surface of stringy bark, where these white ochre body markings float on a plain background and project across space. In 2018, Nonganis further transformed preconceptions of Yolŋu art by introducing recycled fuchsia print toner into her ochre palette, infusing her paintings with pink lightning, and created bold black and white depictions of the Japu grid on Larrakitchen barks using a paintbrush and not a Murawat. And in 2020, Dumbit Muniga, a granddaughter of Japu leader Yolŋu and Gumach leader Mungaroy, turned the wheel full circle with her explosive cycle of barks painted in different shades of blue acrylic. Dumbit's 2021 diptych is a provocative response to Australia's long-standing refugee policy. The first represents Yolŋu pushing Prime Minister Scott Morrison and the Treasurer out to sea in a canoe from Yirrkala Beach, while the second depicts refugees being escorted by sharks of the artist Japu clan and welcomed ashore with full ceremony by the Yolŋu. The monolithic narrative of Western ways of thinking is challenged by these alternative ways of seeing and thinking, as Thomas Machiavelli states. Today's art can no longer be a holding action for the past. The current mandate is more in keeping with Jean-Francois Lyotard's remark that art is a perpetual crisis. As a map that shows us where we have been and a record that shows us who we were, surely art speaks about the past, but currently it has more to do with intuiting the future, squinting into its darkness for a glimpse of its unknown face. Also underlying Yolŋu art is a depth of epistemological and environmental knowledge built up over millennia, which lie behind all of these barks. The linear order of the PowerPoint, a tracing or tracking of trajectories of innovation and watershed moments within a dynamic Yolŋu art history, exists as a starting point for interrogation and debate in thinking about tradition and modernity, cultural maintenance and radical art making that defy precedent. The order also mimics the art historian's methodology and a non-Yolŋu paradigm. Yet the works at any point possess the power of startling surprise, a composition, an intuitive drawing, a materiality of form that induces awe in the non-Yolŋu viewer, even if the Minji, in its inwardness, enfolds within itself unfathomable conceptual layers of ritual gravitas, song, dance, and immutable Wonga law. By looking at recent intercultural moments within this continuous cycle of history, which extends over incalculable millennia, modulations and quantum leaps are discernible within lineages of artists. Hence, Nonganis' most recent work looks back to her father Mundakul and echoes in its linear boldness the work of her husband Judith Muninga. It could be said that the 1937 to 1942 bark paintings are on one level some of the most modern, prefiguring in their daring use of negative space the brilliant new direction of Nonganis' lightning in the rock or pink lightning, or as T.S. Eliot stated in 4 quartets, in my beginning is my end. In my end is my beginning. My first introduction to Aboriginal art was through looking at Yolŋu bark paintings. They abide with me still. Their organic materials of manufacture afford them a three-dimensional quality, a rawness, a physicality of gesture absent in the video-powered art biennales and art fairs of today. I thank you all for listening, and I pay tribute to all of the knowledge that the Yolŋu are sharing in these glorious paintings and their gift to us as non-Yolŋu people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judith. I'm sure that all of our participants are at home applauding what was a wonderful lecture. And I loved how you finished by saying that the generosity of these artists and these communities to share not only these amazing works with us, but their knowledge and their stories. And you have likewise done that for us this evening. We've gone on an amazing journey, and even though we're only looking at these in digital reproductions, they are still amazingly powerful and amazingly moving works. As I did say at the beginning, if time permitted, we would have questions, but I am just looking at the time and we have just a couple of minutes. So, well, we do have one question there. What is used by Munga to create the vivid blue in these works, Judith?
It's acrylic pigment. Dumbit had a very serious car accident and she was nursed back to health by her mother, Gulumbu. And she finds it difficult to manipulate the ochres, and therefore she uses a marawat, human hairbrush, but she finds the acrylic is easier and faster drying, easier for her to manipulate. And so Yolŋu have given her special permission. And she began with colours, you know, red, yellow, black, and used to mix green. And then she hit upon the blue. Her favourite colour, she's thinking of the sky and the water that surrounds her. And she just has a particular fascination for blue, cobalt, and all different shades of blue, Prussian, aqua. And she's really come alive with this pigment.
Yeah, they're amazing works. I'd like to wrap up. I said we've only got less than a minute to go, and we will actually be cut off. The system will cut us off. So, on behalf of the alumni and La Trobe University, I'd like to thank Judith for what was an amazing lecture, and to just thank you for sharing. You've always been such a generous curator and academic and lecturer, and we've been really, really privileged this evening to hear from you. So thank you once again. Thank you to Carly and Esther as well for all their hard work and the alumni. And thank you to our participants for coming along. We really, really appreciate people engaging with what the alumni put on. And this is just another wonderful example of what they do. So I bid everyone a farewell this evening and actively encourage everyone to, now that the museums are open, to go back and have a look at these wonderful works which are on display at the NGV and other places. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a great evening. Thank you, Judith.
Thanks, Vince.